Ladies and gentlemen, you are now listening to That's 3 Ref, a wrestling podcast.
Hello, everybody. You are listening to another extreme episode of That's 3 Ref, a wrestling podcast. I am, of course, your friendly neighborhood cosplaying goof, Jesse White Deer. I am, of course, joined by the Bagman, Cody Bags. That's Cody Bags with a Z. You got the big homie, or the big Oklahoma, Ian Cooper. And, of course, your friend and mine, the Fragmented Luchador, the immortal Chris Lawson. How's everybody doing?
Hello. Seems like
I'm doing pretty good, brother. I'm doing pretty good.
Cody, what do you got?
I'm good. I'm ready to talk some wrestling, some extreme wrestling.
Feeling a little bit extreme tonight.
Okay. All right. Cool. So, on this episode, we are covering ECW One Night Stand from 2005, the year of our Lord. This, of course, was the inaugural event. We wanted to cover this to kind of, get back into the extreme, if you will. So, really cool stuff here. Very a little bit of nostalgia, I think, for a lot of people. So yeah, but so normally we would take listener mail, but we did not get any listener mail this episode. But if you are so inclined, you can send your questions, comments, definitions, recipes, suggestions, mechanic advice, whatever. You can send it over to that's3ref@gmail.com, or you can IM the page on Facebook or Instagram. That's 3Ref, a wrestling podcast, on both of those. Yep. So that's about it. Draco 83 on Instagram did shout us out. He said nice when we made the post. So but yeah, and then no pet of the week this week, so we didn't get any of those submissions. But if you want to submit your pet of the week, you could do so on the email, that's 3ref@gmail.com, or you can IM the Facebook or Instagram page. But yeah, there we go. But yeah, so before we jump in, what are your guys's memories of this pay-per-view, and maybe just a couple of highlights on your thoughts on ECW in general? And Cody, will start with you.
Okay, yeah, so I had watched a little bit of ECW growing up. Not a ton of it. I would catch a match here or there, catch a promo. But as a kid, I wasn't invested in it, and I didn't know a ton about it. So the first time that I watched this particular pay-per-view, this was my first deep dive into ECW. I knew enough about it, and I knew enough of the wrestlers that I was able to follow along with everything that was going on. I recognized everyone. I had never seen them in that particular setting. So I do have a lot of nostalgia for this particular event. My opinions on wrestling have changed a little bit. I like different styles of wrestling now than I did as a kid. So some of this extreme stuff I'm not as into as I was. But first of all, this particular pay-per-view wasn't that egregious on the extreme anyways, for the most part. But regardless, this particular one does have a soft spot for me for the nostalgia and for introducing me to a lot of these guys in that particular setting.
For me, I was really hyped up about watching that, and then come 2005, back in June when this pay-per-view hit, I was so excited about it. Then I realized that I was going to be gone because I was out of the country. Went to Australia back in June of 2005 for the whole month, so I was kind of bummed out because I was really super looking forward to that. But then again, looking back on it, and I was like, at least I went back later and I was able to watch it again, and then watch it again. That I wish I would have got to watch it when it came out the first time, but like I said, being out of the country kind of put a damper to that. But like I said, I knew, like Cody, I knew some of the ECW wrestlers because they were coming to WWE. So, but I did my own before then. I did when research when I was younger, found out about what ECW was, and I'm like, wow, this is a lot more extreme, no pun intended, than what the WWE hardcore division was at the time. So I was like, I knew who they were, but like I was always big into Rob Van Dam because he always had that, the thumbs with the RVD. And then with me having my initials ITC, I would do that too. And I was just like, man, Rob was cool. So I was kind of bummed out that he didn't get to wrestle. But like I said, it was nostalgia for me as well. And so this was a really decent pay-per-view. Not, like I said, I would have loved it if I got to watch it because I was really looking forward to watch it with my friends at the time. But hey, I've now got to rewatch it and watch it now with you guys, like my family. So good pay-per-view overall.
So ECW was my bread and butter. I loved the whole extreme factor of everything, where it was like literally no rules. You literally just go out there and do whatever it takes to take your opponent down. And I mean, that's where most of my favorite wrestlers came from. Like, like Raven. Raven got his big break in ECW. Uh, True, he was in WWF beforehand in WCW, but I think he didn't actually get his footing and his bearing until he came into the whole factor of ECW because he was able to be himself per se, But sad to say he wasn't in this pay-per-view, which it would have been nice to see him. But all around this pay-per-view in general, it was just nice to see after the hiatus that had been between this pay-per-view and then before the last time that they had an ECW event. It was nice to see a lot of the older very mainstays, the staples of what it was that made up the roster of ECW. So it was nice to come back and see that, and also to see uh, just younger versions of all my favorite wrestlers. So because I remember when I got into wrestling again after not watching it for a while, it was around the 2005 era. So it was literally around this time when I got back into it. So it was, like I said, it was just like I was a kid again.
It was nice to go back for nostalgia and watch this. I remembered when hearing about ECW, and like Cody, I had never really kept up with it while watching wrestling. And then I had heard about it, ECW, when they, when guys like Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, Tommy Dreamer, Raven, Shane Douglas had already left ECW and started going to WCW and WWE. But yeah, I mean, it was cool. It was this pay-per-view, and a lot of people give it credit for, because of course a lot of people remember 2006 with RVD and John Cena. But I think this pay-per-view also has its own charm. So it was nice to go back and check this out. But yeah, so moving on to the meat and potatoes of it. The 2005 ECW One Night Stand was the inaugural One Night Stand pay-per-view event produced by WWE. It took place on June 12th, 2005 at the Hammer's, the Manhattan borough of New York City, New York. Although wrestlers from Raw and SmackDown appeared on the show, the event primarily was a reunion for some of the ECW wrestlers. Terry Funk was notably absent as he was attending Shane Douglas's Hardcore Homecoming reunion show 2 nights earlier and couldn't afford to wrestle both shows as he was pushing 60 at the time. Shane Douglas was also absent. Shane Douglas, of course, was the original ECW champion. He had came from NWA. So most notably, he had thrown the NWA world title down, which was at the time, and hoisted up the ECW title. But yeah, Shane Douglas, a long mainstay of the original ECW, I should say, but did not make a comeback because he was on the outs with WWE. Also absent were Too Cold Scorpio, Jerry Lynn, New Jack, and Raven. Attendance for this event was 2,500. 325,000 people bought the event on pay-per-view, which was a very, moderate success. A little bit about the Hardcore Homecoming. That was held on June 10th, 2005 at the Alhambra Arena, formerly unofficially known as the ECW Arena in South Philadelphia. This was 2 days before the One Night Stand pay-per-view. The show was preceded by a fan tailgate party in front of the former ECW Arena. Yeah, so this would happen a lot in territory wrestling in the 1980s when many independent promotions would hold barbecues before and after the event. So, yeah, really cool stuff there. No former ECW performers under contract to WWE appeared at the event, nor did they appear at any of the other Hardcore Homecoming events, which soon followed. However, Mick Foley, a retired worker who wasn't under contract to WWE at the time, made an unannounced appearance. Former ECW ring Archies, known as Bob Ortiz, and Stephen DeAngelos worked the event, as did former ECW referees John Finnegan, Mike Connier, and John Pee Wee Moore, and former timekeeper, ECW timekeeper Rocco Musansako. Probably butchered that. But yeah, in 2001, ECW was closed down to financial reasons, and the WWE had acquired the former promotion's assets in 2003. With the overwhelming success of the rise and fall of ECW, which came ECW announced they would be holding an WWE announced they would be holding an ECW reunion show on the 12th of June 2005 at the Hammerstein Ballroom. It was, of course, called One Night Stand. Although the build-up for the pay-per-view began in the middle of May, plans were in works behind the scenes for several months in advance. Tommy Dreamer was, of course, was tasked with organizing the event and getting some of the ECW alumni to participate to the show. He, of course, got a hold of Sandman, Sabu, and everyone else. Yep. So, a little bit of running up to it. So, the original idea was actually pitched by RVD. So he says that in the pay-per-view, he was the one that brought the idea to Vince McMahon, and of course, the WWE produced it. Excuse me. So, although many of the individual matches on One Night Stand didn't really have any build-up, choosing to focus on the invasion angle involving WCW and ECW wrestlers invading, quote unquote, WWE. WWE had, of course, owned both assets, so they actually owned both companies, but were kind of using it for an ill-fated invasion angle. But the invasion angle began on May 9th of Raw, when General Manager Eric Bischoff made a statement regarding the pay-per-view, saying that he would squash ECW like a bug. The following agreed to an ECW rules match with Chris Benoit. In the middle of the match, Eric Bischoff came to stop it, announcing that any ECW-related stuff was banned from Raw. He would vow to destroy ECW with the help of the Raw superstars chosen to compete at the pay-per-view. Bischoff planned an ECW funeral on the next week's Raw, but Vince McMahon interrupted and spoke in favor of the ECW reunion and the financial interest in bringing back the promotion. Paul Heyman came out and reminded Vince McMahon he did not own ECW anymore, but he still had control of it. Heyman would say that he welcomed Eric Bischoff's invasion, claiming you may light a fire that you can't put out, and then proceeded to set the funeral wreath ablaze. The following next week on Raw, Benoit defeated Tajiri in an ECW rules match. The next week, Bischoff set up a tables match between Edge and Benoit. During the match, Benoit attempted a flying, but failed after Lita had moved Edge out of the way. At that point, Bischoff, sent several wrestlers to assault Benoit. June Sinski booted Benoit in the face, and Edge powerbombed Benoit through the table for the win. This feud Invasion angle would also spread over to SmackDown. On May 26th episode of SmackDown, Kurt Angle said that ECW was a low-class promotion, and he would be a part of the WWE Invasion of One Night Stand. With him, a week later, Angle asked Taz to join him in the Invasion. On the same night of SmackDown, JBL announced that he would be joining Angle in invading the pay-per-view. When Taz rejected the offer, he was, of course, attacked. But yeah, so that's kind of the meat and potatoes of it leading up to it. So we begin the event with the original ECW intro. So always really cool to see that. The event started with a speech from ECW commentator Joey Styles, who was greeted with an ECW chant. Styles, of course, was emotionally overwhelmed and welcomed the fans to One Night Stand before introducing the color commentator of the evening, Mick Foley, Cactus Jack, Mankind, Dude Love, the wrestling god, Mick Foley. So shouts out to Mick Foley. It's great to see him here. But of course, we start with Lance Storm, accompanied by Don Marie, and he defeated Chris Jericho. They go 17 minutes and 15 seconds. Or, I'm sorry, 7 minutes and 15 seconds. Originally, Chris Candido was scheduled to wrestle Storm, but died less than 2 months before the event. Jericho was announced as his replacement after. At TNA, Total Nonstop Action Wrestling's Lockdown pay-per-view on April 24th, 2005, Candido and dislocated his ankle during a steel cage match with Lance Holt against Apollo and Sonny Sakai. He underwent surgery the following day to have titanium plates and screws inserted into his leg. He was on the following episode of Impact, managing the Naturals to defeat America's Most Wanted to win the NWA World Tag Team Championships. On April 28, 2005, Candido fell ill and his condition worsened during the day. He had collapsed in the evening and was rushed to the Robert Wood Hospital in New Brunswick, New Jersey. He was diagnosed with pneumonia. Doctors drained his lungs, but Candido died soon afterwards. He was 33 years old. His brother Johnny initially believed that Candido died to a blood clot, a complication from the surgery. In a 2016 interview, Johnny would reveal that Chris's autopsy confirmed that he did not die from a blood clot, but rather acute pneumonia brought on by his surgery. Of course, this had a very profound effect on CM Punk, who in 2014 over the possibility of a post-surgery clot similar to what had believed happened to Candido. TNA would hold a Chris Candido Memorial Tag Team Tournament in his honor in 2005. And then 2009, he was inducted into the Hardcore Hall of Fame. But yeah, so a couple of highlights for me. Lance Storm was accompanied to the ring by Don Marie. During the match, a Chris Candido chat broke out, a reference to the recently deceased wrestler. Storm in the original ECW. Chris Jericho came out as his Lionheart Chris Jericho character, a version of himself he played in the original ECW. This match would start with lots of reversals. We get a bow and arrow submission, some chops, a drop kick, baseball slide combination from Jericho. At one point, we see Lance Storm leap to the counter, and Jericho reverses it by drop kicking Storm's back. Lots of back and forth. Chance of Chris Candido, lots of reversals, a super kick from Lance Storm, flying elbow from Jericho. Chris goes for the walls of Jericho. We get an interference by Don Marie. eventually we get Just Incredible, who was one half of the Impact players with Lance Storm in the original ECW. He was, of course, on the apron with Jason Knight. Jericho knocks both of them off and goes for the roll-up. Storm counters by kicking Jericho, and Just Incredible hits Chris Jericho in the face with the Singapore cane, and Storm gets the roll-up. So, yeah, I mean, pretty cool, quick and dry match. Both Chris Jericho and Lance Storm were both great. This match was good. It was a good opening match. But other than that, I mean, not really much for me. Cody, what do you have?
So I like this match quite a bit. A few things that stood out to me. When the match started, you notice that they go straight to the wrestling. And I mean like actual wrestling. To the point that Mick Foley actually makes a couple comments, a couple that I noted. Foley said, "Sometimes I think the fans get a raw deal as being overly bloodthirsty, which don't get me wrong, they are, but they also appreciate good wrestling." I like that quote. And then it goes on a little bit more with the wrestling, just the wrestling, to the point that Foley again comments whenever the first punch is swung in the match. I really like that the first match of the night did not jump into immediate chaos, which, I mean, it's ECW, so you got to have chaos. But I really like that they slowly bring the fans into it. They don't give them everything in the first match so that they're burnt out by the end of the night. So they open with some really good fast-paced wrestling to get the crowd warmed up. And then they obviously they end it with the first interference of the night, which is something that we see a lot. But, you know, that's something that ECW was known for. So that I was fine with that. But, you know, overall, I really like how they opened it, the show. I mean, they kept the chaos limited for this first match so that they could build it up throughout the night in different ways. So I really like that. Also, again, going back to Foley on commentary, nice shout out to Smoky Mountain Wrestling. Foley referenced a story that Jim Cornette has told for years, and I'm pretty sure Jericho has confirmed it in the past, although I could be wrong about that. Foley mentioned that Jericho had broken his wrist in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and that's what led to him and Lance Storm actually breaking up. Jericho allegedly broke his wrist practicing a shooting star press in an empty arena before the event. And he wasn't even scheduled to do a shooting star press that night. He just did it to do it and broke his wrist and temporarily derailed his career. So I like the little bit of reference to wrestling history there from Mick Foley. Appreciate that a lot. And conclusion, I thought the finish of the match was pretty good. The great counters. When Lance Storm countered the Lion Salt, but then Jericho countered that back into the walls, which led into the interference and the distractions. Some good stuff. Everyone was where they were supposed to be. Everything looked believable for what it was. But those are my thoughts.
Mine would probably be short and sweet. To be honest with you, didn't know before this match that like I said, I liked researching ECW, but I never knew at the time. I guess didn't do enough research at the time to find out that Jericho was in ECW. So I was really pleased to find that out because at the time I was all about Jericho, man. No pun intended on that. But yeah, just good technical wrestling between two good wrestlers, and the match was short and sweet and simple, but I liked it. So not much I have to add on there.
This match was I loved every single bit of it because you got to see two guys who had so much history between them, being like former tag partners, former, just best friends, both being fellow Canadians. It was nice to see these two do what they do best. And the one thing that I loved the most was that, Chris Jericho, despite doing despite having another gimmick in WWE, he came out as his old Lionheart gimmick, which was nice. A very nice nostalgic moment to see him back in that whole in that gimmick, because that's kind of what started it all for me. When I first ever saw him, I was like, oh man, this guy's cool. He's I like everything he's doing. He's got very nice swagger, and he can wrestle. Yeah. But anyways, but it was just kind of cool to see everything play out and watch them do the slow build up that they didn't necessarily have to do, but they did it anyways because they wanted to give the fans something to savor, as you might say. But in conclusion, like I said, I really love this match. It was probably one of my favorites. I have a few favorites of this night, but like this one was definitely one of my favorites, just to see these two guys do what they do best.
But yeah, so we would cut to Styles and Foley telling us that the Raw and SmackDown superstars will be showing up soon. And then we get a promo by the Pitbull, Gary Wolf, who snarls and wants us to remember the ECW wrestlers who had passed away. A tribute video played next, highlighting wrestlers from ECW that died between the promotion's end in 2001. And so a very fitting tribute from the ECW guys. Very well done. Match 2 would be a three-way dance between Super Crazy, and he would defeat Yoshihiro Tajiri, who was accompanied by the Sinister Minister. This is pre-Coke days, so Sinister Minister before that Booger Sugar, and Mikey Whipwreck, who jury's still out if he's partakes in Coke or not. Was of course accompanied by Big Guido. No medium Guido out there, but so we got Big and Little Guido, Tracy Smothers, JT Smith, and Tony Mamaluke. Joey Styles would note that Little Guido and Tony Mamaluke were the only two of Italian descent. Quick story: JT Smith actually was in the original ECW and had suffered a concussion, and as kayfabe, or in wrestling, he woke up and thought he was Italian by suffering a head injury. So there you go. Yep. So Tajiri, of course, was accompanied by the Sinister Minister and Mikey Whipwreck. So on and so forth. And then Super Crazy comes out to a very large pop, actually. I think Super Crazy actually got the biggest pop out of these three guys. And Little Guido is on the shoulders of Big Guido and all the other full-blooded Italian members. The match occurred when Super Crazy delivered a moonsault off of the balcony onto all the members of the FBI. Little Guido was the first to be eliminated when Whipwreck came into the ring and delivered a whippersnapper, or what's more commonly referred to as like a stunner. Not really a stone cold stunner, but Mikey Whipwreck, if I'm not mistaken, invented the move, or at least he popularized it, calling it the whippersnapper. He, of course, hits that from the to Little Guido. Super Crazy gets the pin. So it's Super Crazy and Tajiri gets the pin, and then it's of course Super Crazy and Tajiri duking it out the end. Super Crazy would of course win by performing a moonsault off of the top rope onto Tajiri, getting the 3 count in the process. A couple of cool things from these guys. Tajiri, hits the miss match. Lots of cool stuff from Super Crazy. Of course, Super Crazy was 1/3 of the Mexicools in WWE, but I think he was more fondly remembered for his ECW run. I really enjoyed the 3-tier moonsault. So he would moonsault from the bottom turnbuckle, or the bottom ropes, medium ropes, and then the top rope. So always enjoyed that spot.
You touched on what happened pretty well, so I don't have too much to add. Just a couple things that I liked. First, you'd mentioned that Styles commented on most of the FBI not actually being Italian. I like that. I like that callback to the original ECW. I also chuckled at Styles' joke about calling in the UN to help with the match, since we had representatives from all over the world and it was going to be chaos. Thought that was kind of clever. Another thing, to go back to the point I made on the first match, how Storm and Jericho kept things pretty contained and they didn't go too crazy. I like that this match played it up a notch. There was some more interference. They went outside the ring for the first time, and obviously Super Crazy got his dive. If anybody's going to get that dive on the whole card, of course it's going to be Super Crazy. But then they took it back to the ring. And so again, I like that this pay-per-view is building up the chaos a little bit at a time. They're testing the waters. Every match we get to see something, but unlike some modern wrestling, it's not nonstop chaos the whole way through. So I really enjoyed that. But I mean, other than that, I think you hit on everything. The match was, honestly, in my opinion, really good for what it was. It was not meant to be a main event level match, but all three of these guys were outstanding cruiserweights in their prime, and they were still in great condition when this pay-per-view took place. So I thought they put on a great show.
Not much really to really add on to that, but that, yeah, the awesome moonsault, that was holy crap moment for me. Also, just, it's funny because I knew who Tajiri was, but as for, and then Little Guido when he was Nunzio, but really didn't know who Super Crazy was. But I was just impressed. I was like, I need to go back and go to YouTube and watch some of this Super Crazy stuff, because he won me over as a fan, even though he had been wrestling prior. I never had watched him before, so he won a fan out of me that night for that. So that's all really I have for that match.
Oh man, see, this match, I expected to go a different way. I expected Tajiri to win, to be honest. But when it came to when it came to this match, it was the best display of three of one of the best, some of the best cruiserweights in the whole division. And that's one thing that I did notice in this pay-per-view, that you got a lot of cruiserweight action, which is not something you see very often anymore. Like, cruiserweights are just kind of like a thing of the past, or they're put on some sort of like low card, where they are in this match, in this event, but still, they always show up and show out. And they always give you that high energy, and that's something that you can always expect from great cruiserweights, especially Tajiri and Super Crazy. Just seeing these guys just do their thing. The one that I didn't really was kind of like for was Little Guido. He didn't really do anything for me. He didn't do it for me as Nunzio. He didn't do it for me as Little Guido. He was just kind of like always just there, But just getting to see Tajiri and Super Crazy do what, just put on a great fucking match. It was just nice to see that. But yeah,
it was a good match for what it was. Short and sweet. Nothing really too much to say there. So we'll move on. Match 3, or the third match of the evening, we had Rey Mysterio Jr. And he defeated Psychosis. They go 6 minutes and 23 seconds. Mysterio won the match at the 7-minute mark after delivering a 619, followed by a West Coast pop. The two had a very entertaining match with lots of back and forth. The two would reveal later, though, that they were disappointed with how the match had panned out. But a couple of things from me. this came to the ring with his mask on and then removed it for the fans. So very typical in lucha libre wrestling or Mexican style wrestling. Your mask is your character. So by removing the mask is very, it's kind of like a sign of disrespect. So if a Mexican wrestler loses his mask, it's like the end of his career. But here, Joey Styles remarks that by Psychosis willingly the fans, it's kind of a sign of respect. And Psychosis and Rey Mysterio would have a storied wrestling career. They were, of course, both trained by Rey Mysterio Sr., Rey Mysterio's uncle. And Rey Mysterio is translated to Mystery King for you out there in listener land. So you get a lesson in Spanish on this episode. So very cool there. But yeah, lots of back and forth. These guys go to the outside a lot. Really just a nice tight match in 6 minutes and 23 seconds. But yeah, if you ever get a chance, definitely check these guys out when they were in WCW. Psychosis was wrestling underneath a mask in WCW in that cruiserweight division. So they put on some excellent matches there.
This was actually one of my favorite matches of the night. I know that's kind of a hot take because a lot of people were disappointed in it. And I understand why, because it was not what these guys had done in the past, not what they had done in WCW or in their previous run in ECW and even in WWE. So I get it. But at the same time, I'm a big fan of wrestling psychology, like I've mentioned before. And I'm a big fan of working the crowd. And that's how I took it whenever Psychosis took his mask off to the crowd. I know what Joey Styles said, but it really seemed to me like Foley and Styles weren't expecting that, and they were trying to figure it out and convey something to the listeners at home. But the way I took it, and maybe I'm wrong, but I saw it as Psychosis trying to piss off the fans. I mean, he had to have known, anyone would have to know that the fans want the mask. That is who he is. That's who he was then. That's what they remembered. And by taking his mask off, he was disrespecting his, not just the traditions of a luchador, but also his history in ECW. And so I took it as him intentionally letting the audience know, like, I'm the bad guy here. You're going to boo me. And then throughout the match, he, for the most part, refused to do the high-flying work that everyone expects from him. And I know in a lot of ways that just straight up disappointed people, but I liked it because it felt like he was, like, that's what he was trying to do. He was trying to piss them off. And to me, he was able to do that and still have a good match. He still did everything he did well, and I really got into it, and that's why. So it's not my favorite match of the night, but it's up there for me. But I also understand that's a hot take and that a lot of people don't agree with me on that.
I guess for me, in my opinion, I just took it as another Rey Mysterio Psychosis match because it was reminiscing for me of WCW, their matches together, and just that they were a little bit older and they were a little bit older and not really lost their step, but just kind of like it was your typical Rey Mysterio Psychosis match to me. But I just thought it was kind of weird that he took off his mask because, I was younger when I was a kid and watched Psychosis and Rey Mysterio, and like to kind of add what like Cody said, that was kind of like, taking off the mask, like, oh, that's so rude, but yeah, he had to establish himself as the heel, like Cody and you said, Jesse, that he's the bad guy, so you had to know who did you need to cheer for if you were just watching that mess for the first time. So it was a decently good match. I liked it. I just felt kind of let down because it wasn't as good as their previous WCW matches. But like I said, that could be chalked up to, like I said, them being a little bit older. But overall, decent match for me.
For me, I gotta say, it was definitely kind of off-putting for me. Like, because you expect two luchadors to be high-flying, very death-defying, which you saw a little bit of it with when Super Crazy, or not Super Crazy, my bad, Brain, when Psychosis did the flying leg drop off the turnbuckle onto the Rey Mysterio on the guardrail. So you got to see a little bit of it, but this was very much a more grounded match where they kind of stuck to keeping each other grounded, which is, something that anybody who is not a luchador most definitely tries to keep a luchador from doing. Is that if you keep them grounded, you basically you basically have them stopped, and that's one thing that the both of them kind of did for each other. You had your moments where you would have, I'm repeating myself, but you would see that, but it would just it was not as much as you kind of hoped out of a match between two great luchadors. Uh, so I mean, all around it was still a good match, but it was just a little off-putting for me. That's about all I got though.
Chris, you mentioned off-putting. We're about to get to some off-putting comments by some of the SmackDown superstars. So after this match, the SmackDown superstars entered the ballroom. They consist JBL and his cabinet, Carlito and Matt Morgan. I think Orlando Jordan was also in that cabinet. Can't remember the other guy, but who gives a crap? The crowd chanted, "You suck dick, fuck you, SmackDown," as they entered the arena. Joel Garther, something, attempted to interview the invaders, but Angle took the microphone out of his hand and JBL pushed him to the ground. So typical JBL fashion. JBL and Angle both cut promo. Crowd continuing to chant, "You suck dick," to which Angle replied, "Your mother taught me how." So, yeah, there you go. Angle stated, "The last time I was at an ECW event, I walked out halfway through because it sucked," referring to the high incident show from 1996 where the Sandman was crucified by Raven, and Angle was invited by Paul E. Heyman, and Angle was very offended, and this would cause him to actually go to WWF and then later WWE. So for a brief moment, he was considering ECW, and then that incident happened. But yep, so they just continued to chant "shut the fuck up" to when JBL spoke. Of course, we Rob Van Dam and Bill Alfonso, with Van Dam stating it had nothing to do with SmackDown. Van Dam claimed that WCW deserved no credit, that this interview was a shoot with no scripts, and missing One Night Stand was worse than missing WrestleMania. The promo was interrupted when Rhino delivered a gore. Van Dam's former tag team partner Sabu then showed up after the lights turned off and turned back on. And then Rhino and Sabu had an impromptu match. Do you guys have some thoughts on this promo? I know, Cody, you and I had messaged about this and you enjoyed some of this stuff. What are you guys' thoughts on this? And we'll start with you, Cody.
I thought it was a really good promo. And obviously, like, I hate using the terms, but this was for the smart fans, which at this point is the majority of the fans, but at the point of the pay-per-view, it was most of the fans. But it was clearly intentionally for the smart fans, and it was obvious. Like, he wasn't trying to hide it, and he wasn't trying to be subtle about it. But it was good. I like it. It felt genuine, and I'm sure it was. It felt like a shoot promo, like a legitimate promo, unscripted, at least not scripted in the way that WWE does their stuff. And I don't like being I don't like when they try to be overly clever, or if they try to talk too much lingo in the ring, if that makes sense. It just kind of takes me out of the moment. But in this instance, I liked RVD's dig at the WWE script writers and about taking the fans back to a time before RVD had 2 words and stuff like that. So that was good stuff. I really enjoyed it. There's not a whole lot else to say. Beyond, it made sense to see these 3 particular guys involved in one segment together due to their history in the original ECW and also the circumstances around RVD. But that's about it.
Really don't have more to say than what you guys both said. Yeah, I was kind of bummed because Rob Van Dam didn't get to wrestle. But and I was thinking of this when you were saying you couldn't remember the cabinet. I think they had the Basham brothers, that one forgotten tag team that they were. So that could who was be on the cabinet, but I could be wrong too. But yeah, I was just really kind of bummed.
No, you're right, Ian.
Yeah, thanks, Cody. But yeah, just Rob Van Dam, like I said, was my guy, so I was really bummed out. But other than that, it served its purpose, so it was a good promo. Just I was just super bummed that I didn't get to see Rob Van Dam wrestle on the card.
I mean, other than the fact that like you got to actually hear a Rob Van Dam promo, whether it be scripted or not scripted, it was just nice to actually hear him talk and actually show feelings to what he was very passionate about. So it was nice to see that side of Rob Van Dam, so a side that you normally that you rarely got to see. You know, nowadays he's, you know, he barely talks, and if he does, he's most definitely probably higher than a kite. But it was just nice to see him, even if he wasn't able to wrestle. It was just still good to see him in an ECW ring.
So the 4th match of the evening, Sabu, who had RVD and Bill Alfonso on his side, defeated Rhino, the Man Beast, at 6 minutes and 31 seconds. We start out with a nice belly-to-belly suplex by Rhino. You got fired chance, fill the air. Nice springboard dive from Sabu. Face wash from Rhino, or I think it's called a boot wash. But anyways, we get a Hurricanrana or a Frankensteiner if you're Scott Steiner by Sabu. Heel kick to the corner from Sabu. We get a leg drop from the chair. So Sabu had set up the chair, hits him with the leg drop. At one point, Rhino trips Sabu, and Sabu hits his head on the chair. Rhino goes for a gore or a spear and hits the ref. We get a chair or steel chair to the face of Rhino. And then Rhino is in the corner in a seated position, and RV drop kicks the chair to the face of Rhino. And Sabu would win the match with Van Dam's help, as Van Dam delivered a Van Daminator on Rhino before Sabu delivered the Arabian Skull Crusher on Rhino through the table for the victory. So we had the table set up. RVD held Rhino on the table. So he held his head down on the table. And Sabu would deliver the leg drop with the chair underneath his leg or the win. So, this match was okay. I'm not really, for me, like, I don't get why we have to do everything with the chair. I mean, I know it's ECW and it's, and I think Sabu has had better matches. This one was pretty quick. The Man Beast, Rhino is a good wrestler when he wants to be, he definitely does good big guy power stuff well. But this match was just okay for me.
Match quality, I thought this was one of the worst matches of the night, honestly. But at the same time, it wasn't really about that. This was more about the transition from the promo into into the match. It's about the story. It's about the history between these three guys. I mean, you're right about there wasn't build up to these matches, but most of these matches had history that led up to them or that helped make the decision to make these matches. And so there's history here that goes back to ECW. And that's what this was about more than it was about the history between the guys and about finding a way to give RVD something to do without giving him a match. And so match quality wise, it's to me one of the worst. But at the same time, everything else around it, RVD gets you pumped up leading into it. Rhino gets you pissed off. And then you get to see Sabu and you get to see RVD do something when you didn't think you were going to get anything from him. So I take it for what it is. There's some things I liked about it. I also want to note that if I remember right, this was the first match that used a table and a chair, which goes back to the point that I keep returning to of building up. We're getting more and more chaos throughout the night instead of everything at once, which, again, I appreciate. But that's about all I have on this match.
I don't really have much to add more than you guys have said. Also, it probably would have been better had it been Rob Van Dam versus Rhino, but I'll take it for what it's worth. And like I said, yeah, like Cody said, building up to have some little bit of chaos, and you can't really have a match with Sabu or RVD without a chair. So, and I always loved Van Daminator, so I take it for what it's worth. But like Cody said, probably one of the worst matches of the night, but I think it would have been a lot better had it been Rob Van Dam versus Rhino, but I just took it for what it was, so that's what my take on it is.
Yeah, for me, I mean, this match was basically like, I guess, the start of what would become the major chaos that is ECW. Because you got to see, Sabu doing his normal high flying, death defying stuff. So you got, just his mainstays on what he would do. So it was nice to see that I say three guys. Rob Van Dam really wasn't that all involved until like the end, but it was still nice to see these three guys, interact with each other and give the fans the much needed chaos. The one thing that really kind of like took me out of this match in general was old dude with the whistle blowing it every 5 goddamn seconds, annoying the shit out of me. He's just like the old guy who's got to make some noise, running around trying to figure out what to do. Sure, he's ECW history, but he always just kind of like threw me off. Every time he was out there, even in the old school ECW days when he would come out and do the same thing. But and one thing I gotta point out is every time I go back to watching some ECW, I always forget how great Joey Styles is as a commentator because of some of the things he says or brings into like the commentary that kind of just makes it that much more flavor. It kind of reminds me of TNA when Mike Tenay would kind of do the same thing. But yeah, other than that, that's all I got for this.
Yeah, so we cut to Al Snow talking to Head, and we look back at some more ECW memories. Very cool stuff. The Raw superstars show up. They include Eric Bischoff, Jonathan Coachman, Edge, Christian, Tyson Tomko, Snitsky, La Resistance, Maven, and William Regal. When Joey Styles sees Edge, he makes a reference about hide your wife, which is a reference in real life. Adam Copeland stealing Lita from Matt Hardy. So Matt Hardy and Lita were dating at the time. Matt Hardy was injured and wasn't able to be on the road full time. So in the interim, that dastardly dog Adam Copeland stole Lita away, and and that led to some real life heat between Matt Hardy and Edge. And but yeah, so that was going on at this time. Joey Styles made but anyways, so the fifth match of the evening was Chris Benoit, and he defeated Eddie Guerrero, and they go 10 minutes and 38 seconds. Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero had a beautiful match, in my opinion. We get a nice superplex by Eddie. He misses the frog splash. We get a superplex from Chris Benoit. Chris Benoit hits the superplex so hard that he actually flips over. We actually get a nice German suplex by Chris Benoit. We get a nice roll up by Eddie Guerrero. Chris reverses it and gets the win by crossface. So very cool stuff there. Nice technical wrestling, nice hard hitting style. Lots of chops, lots of kind of snug, if you will, snug wrestling. Lots of aggression from Chris Benoit. At one point, we get Eddie Guerrero, who leaves the ring, takes a break, and then gets back in the ring. So Eddie and Chris were with each other during this match, partly because Eddie felt losing to Chris Benoit at this time would hurt his momentum. Eddie's work rate in this match was not to Chris Benoit's liking. They did have a great match. They did have a good match, I guess I should say, in this on this pay-per-view. Probably the best match, in my opinion. But they did have better matches on SmackDown between the two. Eddie would suffer a nose injury. Eddie can be seen mouthing the words, "I owe you one." Unfortunately, Eddie Guerrero would pass away on November 13th of this year due to a heart attack. A lot of wear and tear on his body. This was around the era that Eddie Guerrero was just, in pain most of the time and just couldn't go like he wanted to. So I think all of that contributed to maybe his less than stellar performance on Chris Benoit. But just eventually his untimely end. So shouts out to Eddie Guerrero, one of my favorite wrestlers, but also one of the best to ever do it, really. And unfortunately, the crowd took this time to shout several anti-Lita chants. They would say Lita's got herpes and I fucked Lita, and so that took away from the match, which Benoit and Guerrero weren't happy about as well. Gerter again, and he tries to interview the Crusaders and begged Eric Bischoff for a job. He was not successful. Eric Bischoff would pour his drink all over Gerter and say, "ECW sucks."
So I really enjoyed the Benoit Guerrero match. It might have been my favorite match of the night, honestly. It's definitely up there. Even from when the guys are coming out, Foley mentions the Benoit and Eddie moment at WrestleMania 20. So that was a great callback. I thought it helped the moment, at least for the fans at home, or it helped build up the moment. And along with Foley's comment of how Raw and SmackDown would have both loved to have this match, that both brands wanted this match on their show, but ECW got it. I thought that was a really nice way of making ECW look even better while taking a dig at the other brands. Styles mentions the history between the two and how they'd wrestled over 2,000 times, which, knowing whenever they started in the business, that is not an unusual number. Psychosis and Ray wrestled well over 2,000 times before this pay-per-view too. But with our current mindset and like how much wrestling has slowed down and how less wrestlers actually wrestle now. They wrestle on TV, but they don't wrestle like they used to. They don't wrestle 7-8 times a week anymore. 2000 just seems like an astronomical number to me, thinking about it from like today's point of view. So I like that callback from Styles. I did notice the chants from the crowd during the match, which, you know, I hate that. Makes you wonder if that kind of took Eddie and Chris out of the moment, you know, because it did get a little overbearing. But overall, it was a great match. I enjoy it. The only thing is, obviously, we won't even get into it, but the history with Chris Benoit, I can lose myself in a match, and I can think about nothing else except for the match if I'm really into it. Even his matches, except whenever he does the flying headbutt. I can't help it, but I cringe every single time, and that's usually about the point that I lose interest in the match. But the match ended right after. So, but overall, I think it was quality work. And I also noticed that JBL was showing some respect at the end of the match. The pointing to the SmackDown logo on the T-shirt, clapping for Benoit representing SmackDown. Also made me wonder, we all know that JBL was drunk that night. Makes me wonder if he was even supposed to do that, if he was supposed to be clapping and cheering for an ECW match, or if he was just so drunk at this point that he was just going with it. I don't know. I'm sure somebody's talked about it before, but I thought that was funny. But that's about all that I have for this match.
You nailed it on the head, Jesse, that they did have much better matches on like Raw and SmackDown. But also, like you, Jesse, I was a big fan of Eddie because just Eddie, full redemption story from where he had all his problems in the past, and then finally to win the big one months prior and everything, and WrestleMania. So that was or when he won a No Way Out from Brock. But yeah, Eddie and Chris, they always had great matches together, but I just felt like this was great, but they've had better ones in the past. But I was just, like I said, and I remember also watching them. They've also had several matches in WCW as well that were really good too. So just another good match with two good technical wrestlers. And I just wish Eddie would have won because I was more a fan of Eddie than I was Benoit. But yeah, overall decent match. I just wish it would have gone longer and the Eddie would have won instead of Benoit. But that's all I have about it.
Oh, for me, like this match was it was what it was. It was great because you got to see two amazing wrestlers who are like kind of like what I said for the first match. You know, you got to see two friends really show each other like the best of their what they got. You know, and they you know they didn't really get to do it on like WWE, but a lot. But when they did, or when you got to see them, they definitely did well, and it was nice to see these two just full on, uh, you know, to the point where anytime where you would see most of the time you would see a wrestler go after the other wrestler if they got out of the ring. Chris was showing absolute respect for Eddie, you know, giving him that breathing time, giving him that time to be like, okay, you know, and then you know just knowing kind of what unfolds a couple months later, you know, in the later in the year of 2005, it just kind of like makes you think, um, like how steadily was his health declining, you know, Eddie, because you could definitely see that he wasn't moving like he used to, or wasn't moving as quickly as he would normally, but he still put on a great match. He still did what he would came out to do, and that's wrestle with his best friend, you know. So But and one thing that, like I said, it just kind of threw me off was definitely the watching the flying headbutt. I was just like, okay, I'm done. I didn't even, I honestly didn't look because I don't like seeing that head. I don't like seeing that move in general from anyone. Not Bam Bam Bigelow, not Chris Benoit, not anyone, because of the whole situation when it comes to what happened with Chris Benoit. But anyways, not to harp on that, not to go off anything there, but it was just all around. Like I said, it was this match probably was one of my favorites because I got to see two of my favorite wrestlers of this era do an amazing job inside the squared circle.
So the sixth match, or we saw Mike Awesome defeated Masato Tanaka. They go 9 minutes and 52 seconds. We get lots of action at first. Big shoulder block by Awesome. Suicide dive by Mike to the outside. They trade on the outside. We get a nice clothesline by Awesome from the apron on the outside. He would then set up a table for the Awesome Bomb against the rail. Tanaka looks like he almost broke his neck taking this bump. We get a big splash by Osh. Big splash outside the ring. Big power bomb by Awesome. Lots of big chair shots by both guys. We get a nice cutter by Tanaka. We get a DDT by Tanaka. Big chair shot by Tanaka. Nice German by Awesome. We get Mike Awesome slamming the chair into Tanaka's head. They set up another table, DDT through the table, by Mike through the broken table onto the ring. We get a kick out by Masato, another table set up, Awesome bomb to the outside table. We get a big dive, and Awesome gets the win. So the table would be set out on the outside of the ring, and Mike Awesome would throw Tanaka over the top rope onto the table and then dive and pin him on the outside of the ring, which was ECW rules. And then, so during the match, Joey Styles would make several comments about Awesome regarding Awesome's controversial departure from ECW on April 10th, 2000. Awesome made a surprise appearance on WCW Nitro, aiding the New Blood by attacking Kevin Nash while he was the reigning ECW World Heavyweight Champion. Awesome's friend Lance Storm said that he refused to sign a new contract with ECW until Paul Heyman had paid him overdue wages. Due to concerns over legal issues, WCW refrained from having Awesome appear on their television shows with the ECW. Actually, a compromise was reached. Awesome, a WCW employee and the current ECW champion, appeared a few days later at an ECW event in Indianapolis, accompanied by WCW's head of security, where he lost the title to Taz, a WWF employee, who lost it a week later to Tommy Dreamer, a full-time ECW wrestler, who incidentally lost it 20 seconds later to Just Incredible, a ECW wrestler. In July, at the beach, Awesome would adopt a gimmick called the Fat Chick Thriller. His gimmick was had him infatuated with heavyset women, hence the name the Fat Chick Thriller. On September 6, 2000 edition of Thunder, Awesome's gimmick was changed to That 70s Guy, a reference to the TV series That 70s Show, for which he dressed up in 1970s inspired attire and hosted the Lava Lamp Lounge interview segment. He was additionally given a bus that resembled the one featured on the Partridge Family to drive to the arenas as a part of his entrance. In a shoot interview released by High Spots Wrestling in 2005, that he would rather face off with former ECW and WWE colleague Rhino, and suggested that they could have had to put on a better match. A more entertaining match, regardless of the circumstances and the matter in which he had left ECW. after this event, Awesome would say that he was unhappy with the payout for the evening. But yeah, and then at one point during the match, after Awesome had delivered the first suicide dive, it would make a point to say it's a shame he didn't succeed in taking his own life. 20 months after this match, Awesome would commit suicide by hanging himself on February 17th, 2007. Styles has since confirmed that this comment, as well as several other comments he made, were actually shoots. He said if the original ECW was ending, he was going to say whatever the hell I wanted. The match was also notable for the large number of unprotected chair shots to the head that both men took, as well as risky bumps.
This match was almost my favorite match of the night. And I can't even stand Mike Awesome, but this match was so close to being my favorite match of the night. Great work between the two. Again, going back to the history, which I know I've been talking about all night, but that's what this pay-per-view was about. And so there was so much history between these two. It was great stuff. Some really good back and forth. Joey Styles on the mic was so ridiculous, but at the same time, it was real, and you could tell it was real. It was a shoot. It was his feelings. It was the feelings, at least the feelings that he had back when Mike Awesome left. He might have been exaggerating how he felt at the moment. I don't know, but it was real. But the work in the ring was great. I thought this was the part of the night where using the tables and the chairs a bit excessively worked. It worked for these guys. They knew how to do it. They had great chemistry. But then it just kept going. My problem wasn't necessarily that the match was too long, but that it was the length of the match and the fact that they kept trying to one up the last thing they did, and they just didn't stop until the match was over. Mike Awesome nearly crippled Masato Tanaka on that bump that you mentioned when he landed on his neck. I know it pissed a lot of people off when that happened, and it pissed even more people off that after that happened, he continued doing the dangerous he continued taking dangerous risks throughout the match, and so many unprotected chair shots. So for the most part, I do really like this match. It's great work between two guys that had a great history, that knew each other really well, but they just didn't know when to stop, especially Mike Awesome. He just didn't know when enough was enough, and it kind of ruined it for me. I think that it wouldn't have bothered me so much if he hadn't already had that major botch that legitimately almost crippled Tanaka and then just kept on with it. So that was kind of my takeaway from it. Although if you didn't mention it, I was going to mention Joey Styles' comment about the suicide dive. It's a shame he didn't succeed in taking his own life. That was pretty harsh, especially in hindsight. But I did note that at the end of it, going back to trying to figure out whether or not JBL was drunk, there's a moment where he seemed legitimately concerned. I don't think it was after that first major botch, but it was after one of the bigger moves. I think one on the table. The camera cuts to JBL for just a second, and he looked legitimately concerned. He did not seem to be in gimmick at the moment. So that was something that I noted. But I mean, other than that, you covered everything else really well. That's about all I have.
Well, you guys nailed a lot of it. Me personally, I don't want to downplay or anything. I was not ever a fan of Mike Awesome. I never liked him in WCW. I didn't really know who Tanaka was, to be honest with you. I didn't. So I was like, I went into this match like, okay, here's Mike Awesome, and who's he gonna hurt in this match? And all those unprotected chair shots and all that, and that neck injury, that was that was the first time I remember kind of legitimately, and as long as I've been watching wrestling, I was like putting my hands over my eyes or getting like, oh God, yeah. So I could have I guess a lot of people could take the match and liked it, like you guys liked it, but me myself, wasn't a fan of it. I didn't enjoy it because, like I said, I didn't like my costume, and then just how squeamish it was. I could have cared. I could take the match or to not cared about it any at all. That's just my opinion on it.
Yeah, for me, we've all expressed not liking Mike Awesome, so I always took it to calling him Mike Awful because he was very much opposite of awesome to me because he was just too generic. He was just like, "Oh, I'm a big man. I'm going to do this. I'm going to decimate. I'm going to do this," and he didn't really get much out of him. Sure, he was a champion. Sure, he was this. Sure, he was that. But he just was not great for me. Never was. And the one thing that really kind of like irked me at one point is when they had that table in the corner. There was a piece of metal sticking out, and all I could think about was Tanaka. Is like when he did that whole, I guess it was a power bomb, but all I could think about was uh, Tanaka getting impaled by that piece of metal. Like I was literally like sincerely worried about that fucking piece of metal the whole match. Well, that whole time, I was like, "That's a freaking hazard. Fix it." But they wouldn't. I mean, they just left it. They left that whole table there, and it just and that's one thing that you definitely noticed, or at least me being a huge hardcore fan, is that especially after this match, you or just after this event, you started to see where they would take that piece of metal off to where it would just be nothing but bare table. Like it would just there would be no hardware. It would just be legs and the table or the board. You wouldn't really see that piece of metal because again, I mean, maybe it was just something that I was seeing as well in this match was that that piece of metal could impale somebody and it could severely hurt somebody. So maybe it was something like that. But that's kind of like what threw me off after that whole situation happened. This match, despite you guys liking it, I gotta go with Ian. I really did not like this match. It was just too blah for me, especially because Mike Awful was a part of it.
Yeah, just the whole chain of the "I am the table."
Yeah.
Well, okay, we'll move on. So you know what was awesome was this promo from Paul Heyman. He would come out and cut a promo in the ring with the crowd chanting "Thank you, Paul," and rising for after thanking several people, including Todd Gordon, the original owner of Eastern Championship Wrestling, and of course later on Extreme Championship Wrestling. Heyman turned his attention to the Raw and SmackDown superstars. He first spoke to Eric Bischoff, stating that Bischoff was in our ECW's house, and then calls him a bitch. And then Heyman turned his attention to Edge and said, "Hide your wives, it's Edge." With Heyman also stating that he has two words for Edge, Matt freaking Hardy. By Edge, he would hold up three fingers and mouth the words. That's three words. But both references to Edge's real life affair with Matt Hardy's long term girlfriend, Lita. At the time of One Night Stand, Hardy was not employed by the WWE, having been fired as a result of his internet rants against Edge and Lita. I think he also called in on a episode of Bite This, which was ECW's call-in line show, and then berated Lita. Maybe some would say justifiably, but yeah. So Matt Hardy was soon after the event. A huge "We Want Matt" chant broke out in the Hammerstein ballroom following Heyman's comments. Heyman then commented that the only reason JBL was WWE champion for a year was because Triple H didn't want to work Tuesdays, a reference to the day SmackDown is taped. So some hot fire from Paul E. Dangerously. But I will kick it over to Cody, and then we'll get your thoughts on this promo.
Overall, this pay-per-view, I don't think, personally, I did not think there was any match that was just straight garbage. I think the worst match of the night I mentioned earlier was Sabu and Rhino, but that was because the emphasis wasn't on the match. That match wasn't trying to be great. It was trying to do something else. The last match I said I really liked up to a certain point, and then it became too much for me in the wrong ways. But the point I'm making, there were no matches on the card that I watched and I was like, this is complete garbage. I hated everything about it. But at the same time, there were no matches that really stood out as like best match I've ever seen or one of the best matches I've ever seen. But this promo might be one of the best promos that I've ever heard. It's not number one. I'll say that. I think Heyman had an even better promo talking about ECW when he was on SmackDown a couple years before this. But there was something so genuine about it. I don't care if it was scripted. I don't know. None of that matters. But there was something about the emotion that Paulie had when he came out, when he cut this promo. He made the digs at the guys, like you mentioned. He mentioned Matt Hardy's name, and this was a time when Matt Hardy was not employed. That's a very ECW thing to do. It fit. I don't know. I'm overstating it when I say it's one of my favorite promos of all time. I know I am. It's just because I rewatched it just today for the first time in a long time. But I do legitimately think that it's up there as far as WWE goes, and I do consider this event WWE. It is up there. And it's because it was real. It was Heyman saying what the crowd wanted to hear. A crowd that had not been heard for a very long time. And he came out, said what they wanted, what they needed. He made the digs that they wanted to hear, the insults. I mean, even Vince McMahon allegedly loved the line that he gave to JBL. The only reason you were WWE champion for a year was because Triple H didn't want to work Tuesday. Allegedly, Vince McMahon loved that. He thought it was hilarious. So I thought this was a great promo, that it was everything the fans needed. It even made Vince McMahon laugh, apparently. And it captured the essence of ECW with the shit talking, the breaking the rules by mentioning Matt Hardy's name at a time when that was banned in the company. So overall, great stuff. It was my favorite moment of the night. The only competition is possibly the stuff that happened after the main event. That's another discussion, though. But yeah, so I really dug it. It was the highlight for me. Always has been. Probably always will be. But that's it.
This promo right here is why Paul Heyman is even though he's not a wrestler, is one of the masters of the mic. He said everything, like Cody said, he said everything that we all felt. And it just felt so genuine and like, wow, this is like, you don't know if this is a shoot. You don't know if this is scripted. It just felt so genuine. And I like going back and watching this promo because of how much the crowd reacts to it. It was just so wonderful. And because at that time, I know reading the dirt sheets and everything reading about with Matt Hardy, because I love as a wrestling fan, I love the Hardy Boys, but everybody I knew was a Jeff Hardy fan. I was more a fan of Matt Hardy because he was more my style. Because yeah, he did the extreme stuff like Jeff, but he was more grounded like me, because I used to do the stupid backyard wrestling stuff, and I wanted to do more stuff like Matt Hardy. So just to them acknowledge that Matt was gone and how much Matt got screwed over, no pun intended, it just was that made me love Paul Heyman. I hated how squirmy he was all the time when he was with Lesnar, but just to have those words, like, you wanted to make sure that he knew he dropped Matt's name, and that made me like kind of changed my mindset of what I really thought about Paul Heyman at the time. But yeah, just great promo. Everything needed to be said, and then I was like, "Are you kidding me?" When he dropped the whole line of "That's the only reason why JBL was champion," I was just like, "That was so true." Because if you smart wrestling fans like me knew that Triple H would only want to work Monday Night Raw. I just thought that was a great, clever line, and I died laughing, and it's still funny to me to watch JBL's reaction to when he said that. Perfect, and then just still a line from the Macho Man himself by one of my ultimate favorite wrestlers. That was a cream of the crop top promo for me.
Well, for me, this promo is definitely one of my favorites. It's literally probably top 5. When it comes to promos, Paul Heyman was always up there. Anytime he would be a mouthpiece for someone or any Paul Heyman just had a way of knowing how to make the crowd react. You know, whether it was good or bad. In ECW, you could definitely tell he would cater to the crowd because those were his fans. Those were people that were there for his company. You know, he ran the company, he was there for it, he did everything for that company. Blood, sweat, and tears. So the fact that he actually got to be in a room full of nothing but pure, unadulterated ECW fans was just, he was in his element. He was in every bit able to say what he wanted, how he wanted, when he wanted. And that's something that I always adored when it comes to Paul Heyman and cutting promos. You know, sure, I don't like him as a mouthpiece for like, sure, nowadays it's kind of like overplayed, you know, because he was he was Brock's manager, then he's Roman's manager, and he's kind of not, he's not there anymore as much, but he's still kind of there. But it's just nice to see a young Paul Heyman doing what he fucking loves best, and that's talking shit.
Agreed.
So the final match of the evening to close us out on this pay-per-view, we get the Dudley Boyz, Bubba Ray and Devon. They defeat Tommy Dreamer in the Sandman. They go 10 minutes and 13 seconds. The Sandman, so the Dudley Boyz come out. The Dudley Boyz had been off TV for a while at Vince McMahon's behest. So the Dudley Boyz had been working WWE at this time, and Vince McMahon had said, "Hey, why don't you take some time off?" I think they had been away from TV for about 6 months, so their return to WWE, but also their return to this ECW pay-per-view was a big one. So they probably got the loudest pop of the evening. But of course, we get Tommy Dreamer coming out, and Tommy Dreamer, like I'd mentioned earlier, was very beneficial in putting all of this together. And then we get the Sandman through the crowd. Metallica's Inner Sandman is blaring on the speakers with the crowd singing in unison. So very, very cool stuff there. If you watch this match on Peacock, you don't get to hear that though. You just kind of get some very generic rock music, which do yourselves a favor and check out this segment from Tommy Dreamer, the Dudley Boyz, and Sandman, and kind of really hones it in. But yep, so we get Sandman coming through the crowd, chugging the beer, bashing on his head, and all of that accoutrement. But as the match was about to begin, the BWO, a stable consisting of Hollywood Nova, Big Cool Stevie Richards, and the Blue Mini entered the ring. BWO stands for Blue World Order, which is a parody of New World Order, which was the big staple in WCW, and it was parodied by ECW with the BWO. So very cool stuff there. And then Kid Cash would interfere along with Balls Mahoney and Axel Rotten, and they would come to the ring with steel chairs and took out the BWO. They all attacked the members of the BWO before hitting Nova with a steel chair twice. Joey Styles would make a reference to Simon Dean. The character Nova had been recently be playing on WWE TV by stating, "That's more painful than being Simon Dean on national TV." We get Kid Cash hitting a dive to all the other wrestlers in the match on the outside. And then Balls Mahoney and Axel Rotten and BWO would brawl up the ramp. So when the match actually began, involved trash cans, cheese graters, street signs, the Impact Bladers, Just Incredible and Lance Storm interfered, attacking Dreamer and Sandman. Francine, Dreamer's former manager, entered the ring and delivered a low blow to Dreamer. Dreamer's other valet in real life, Beulah McGillicuddy, returned to wrestling for the first, sparking a catfight with Francine. The Dudley Boyz eventually won the match with the help of Spike Dudley, who came to the ring with some lighter fluid, and they would send Dreamer through a flaming table with a powerbomb to get the victory. The Dudley Boyz then attempted to attack McGillicuddy before Sandman attacked them with a Singapore cane. Sandman shouted for beer repeatedly while checking on a very bloody Tommy Dreamer. Stone Cold Steve Austin would make his return to the ring with the ECW Originals coming out moments later. Austin referenced his time in the ECW, then asked Raw and SmackDown superstars to come down to the ring. A huge brawl would occur with the original ECW wrestlers fighting Raw and SmackDown, while Bischoff joined Joey Styles and Foley on commentary. The crowd chanted, "We want Taz," which brought out Taz to the ring. He then locked Angle in the Taz mission and choked him out. During the brawl, JBL legitimately attacked Blue Meaning, causing him to bleed. So he was actually punching him with what they would call stiff punches or shoot punches or potatoes or whatever you want to call it, as opposed to the actual working punch. ECW would, of course, win the brawl. Stone Cold Steve Austin would ask Mick Foley to drag Eric Bischoff to the ring. The Dudley Boyz would perform a 3D on Bischoff. Chris Benoit would deliver a diving headbutt to Bischoff. And Rey Mysterio Jr. would deliver the 619 to Bischoff. Austin would ask Bischoff his thoughts on the evening while on the ground. Bischoff replied, "Fuck ECW." Austin then would execute a Stone Cold Stunner on Bischoff to end the show. But yeah, so really cool stuff in this match. This match wasn't really, it was a good match, but it wasn't really for me. With the ladders and chairs and all of that stuff. I mean, it's always, the Dudley Boyz, I think, are one of the more darker rated wrestling tag teams. And I think for my money, they're probably one of the better tag teams that I've seen. Always enjoy those guys. I don't have any strong opinions on Sandman. Tommy Dreamer is always a fun watch. He can put on some really incredible matches. This match was okay. I could have gone either way on it. But yeah, so cool stuff though there at the end with the brawl. Unfortunately, Blue Meanie caught the business end of those JBL haymakers, which it's been stated numerous times that JBL was legitimately drunk during this event and just kind of got out of hand. And the Blue Meanie, of course, would squash their beef years later, but there was some legitimately heat for a while, and then they would work a promo and they would work a match shortly after this event to kind of build off of that real world heat. The Blue Meanie was, of course, reprehensive of that, but Vince McMahon assured him everything would be okay. And then, like I said, a couple of years later, they would mend fences. And Bill very recently had stated that he and JBL were friends, so all good there. Stevie Richards, though, would give JBL what is called receipt in wrestling. So receipt is if you do something to me, I do something to you. If I feel you're a little rough, I might give you a stiff shot back. That's to kind of, hey, let you know, hey, you got me, I got you. So Stevie Richard on an episode of SmackDown would have a match with JBL in which he would lay in a pretty loud chair shot. And that was in retaliation to what happened to the meanie. Yeah, so big Stevie Cool, good friend. So he's willing to crack JBL in the head with a chair for you.
Basically, this is what we were all building to the whole night. Chaos, ECW, hardcore rules at its finest. You got Tommy Dreamer, heart and soul of ECW. I love Tommy Dreamer. I was big a fan of Tommy Dreamer. Like you said, too, you got the Dudley Boys, one of the best tag teams up there for me, top 3 tag teams up favorite of mine. Like I said, also with you, like I could care less about the Sandman. I just thought he was a blatant ripoff of the because at the time I didn't really know who. Like I said, I probably didn't know who Sandman was. I just thought he was a poor man's Stone Cold Steve Austin with a kendo stick. It was like if you had Mick Foley and Stone Cold Steve Austin together in this rip off of him drunk with a cane. But no, just everything that ECW was known for: cat fights, brawls, cheese graters, hardcore, blood at its finest, fire. That stuff you would never see on WCW or on WWE at the time. But overall, decent match. But I love the brawl afterwards because you know that Stone Cold would he would voice his opinion, and you just get to see Bischoff because me at the time being a big loyal WWF fan, seeing Bischoff get his ass kicked, that was just the cream of the crop as well. Just seeing Bischoff happen to him, and but like I said, just like mostly like you and Cody and Chris said, just watching that, I could have the only thing that you could take it off. You could have had Benoit put Bischoff in the cross face instead of the headbutt because just like you guys said, I just no matter who's doing that headbutt, I can't watch that headbutt either because it was a match the other day. Not to go off on a tangent, but it was Chad Gable against somebody, and Gable did the headbutt, and I was just like, no, just please don't stick him with that because I can't watch that because it gives bad memories. But that's neither here or there. But no, overall, it was what we were building to, and it ended the way it should have ended, and I'm glad it ended the way that ended. So it was the nostalgia filled of the old school at UCW for me.
For me, the ending of a tag team match, or if there's ever an ending where the main event is a tag team match, I'm always a fan because I've love tag team work in general, especially when two people who know each other, who have worked together for a long time, do exactly what they like. They don't really have to like think about what the other person's gonna do because they already know each other. They know what their partner's gonna do. Like whereas this match, sure it was a hardcore match. Sure it was the very much bloody situation where Tommy Dreamer donned the crimson mask, as well as Devon, or not Devon, Bubba Ray Dudley. But it was just nice to see these 4 hardcore legends of ECW give a slobber knocker of a match. And then when it comes to the whole, uh, you know, the brawl at the end, it was just it's it's definitely what we were expecting to happen. You have Raw and SmackDown sitting there badgering away the whole night, trying to talk down ECW, and then ECW just still putting up a fight. No matter what happens, they still put up a fight. Because that's what they're known to do. They're here to fight. That's all that's going to ever happen with them. But um as far as the event, or the whole event really, as a general, I would probably rate this a 8.5 out of 10, just for the factor of nostalgia, for seeing all the greats, ECW originals, even some new guys that kind of come into it. It was just nice to see uh just me being a huge ECW fan as a kid, just seeing all these older guys or the guys I grew up watching, you know, come out and do what they do best.
I would agree. I think that this yeah, this match was this pay-per-view was good. For nostalgia purposes, you know, around this time I was watching, so a couple of years after this in 2007 would be about the time that I stopped watching wrestling altogether. So this was one of the kind of bigger pay-per-views that I'd watched towards the end of before, you know, me taking my break and stuff from wrestling. So yeah, a lot of fond memories on this this pay-per-view. And then of course the ECW One Night Stand 2006 when RVD becomes the WWE and ECW world champion at the same time. So yep, that was pretty cool. And yeah, but just kind of wrapping up here. After the show went off the air, the ECW wrestlers left the ring one at a time, but Dreamer stayed in the ring. He bowed to the ECW logo as the crowd chanted, "Thank you, Tommy." The Dudley Boyz came back to the ring and hugged Dreamer, with Bubba Ray saying to Dreamer, "This is all for you." Very sentimental moment there. WWE would adopt the One Night Stand as the annual pay-per-view event and continue the theme of featuring hardcore-based matches on the show. The event returned to the Hammerstein Ballroom for ECW One Night Stand 2006, like we had previously mentioned. So prior to the 2006 ECW One Night Stand, WWE established a third brand dubbed ECW for former wrestlers of the original promotion as well as newer talent to compete on. One Night Stand would continue for another 2 years, dropping the ECW name in 2007 and being promoted as WWE until it was replaced by Extreme Rules in 2009. One Night Stand was originally just renamed to Extreme Rules for 2009, but in 2010, WWE declared the Extreme Rules had its own chronologically, one that was no longer part of the One Night Stand series. Extreme Rules, however, continued to theme the hardcore-based theme. So a little bit of afterbirth for you guys there. So the yeah, thank you so much for sticking around with us on this pay-per-view. We will be back in a couple of weeks, in 2 weeks actually, with December to Dismember, which was the ECW brand's one and only pay-per-view. It actually happens to be the lowest bought pay-per-view in WWE history. But since we're in this era of ECW rebrand, I thought it'd be very fitting to go back and check it out. And through this brand of ECW is how we get CM Punk. So kind of a fun fact there. So we get to see early era WWE CM Punk, as well as Bobby Lashley, Big Show on that pay-per-view, and a host of other wrestlers. So really interesting time back then. I think that also in that ECW branded WWE era, we get Durag Vince, who becomes ECW champion. So yeah, we will be covering some of that stuff in the future, but for the immediate future, we will be Dismember. So if you got any questions about that event, you can send those to the email. That's 3ref@gmail.com. You can IM the Facebook or Instagram page if you want to check out what we're doing. Or of course, I will make that post and you can comment below. If you want to submit your pet for Pet of the Week, you can do so to the email. That's 3ref@gmail.com. Or you can IM the Facebook or Instagram page. That's 3ref at both of those. That's 3ref, a wrestling podcast, I should say. But yeah. So as far as for me, I appreciate you guys sticking around. Always fun doing this. And yeah, we will keep content for you guys. But thank you so much. You guys enjoy your evening. And from everybody over at the That's 3 Ref, a wrestling podcast. You guys have a good night. Be safe. Love yourselves. Love each other. And yeah, keep on rocking or something. No. Yep. Bye.